Hello and welcome back to Critical Thinking. And this week, Module 9, which is the second part of Writing to Analyze. Last week, we talked about the differences between facts, inferences, and judgments. And now we're going to go a little bit deeper into the kind of information that we can come across in our information age. We're drowning in it. We're drowning in information, but we don't usually have a whole lot of knowledge to go with it. It's not a good combination. But if we can sort of redress the balance and say, okay, well, the information I do find, let's test it. Let's take a look at it. Its validity, its truthfulness, the particular claims that it makes. So if we can do this, we are thinking critically about that material. Critical thinkers and thoughtful writers, that we all are, of course. We are constantly trying to figure out what's out there and what's relevant, what's valid, what's useful. And really, ultimately, and sadly, what is truthful in the sense of what it is that I'm trying to present to someone else. So right now, what we're going to do is look at sources of belief, right? Where are we going to get that information? Because I mentioned last week that unlike Plato, who lived in ancient Athens and thought that it was possible to know the entire world, technically, theoretically, sure, but it was a very particular time and place. The world was very small, right? At the very least. Yes, there are other things going on elsewhere, but if you don't know that you don't know, it is possible to actually believe that everything you know you've experienced firsthand. That's no longer possible, right? It just isn't, because so many things are happening around the world, and now we are looking at things that are occurring on other planets as well. I mean, that's casting our net rather far and wide. So if that's the case, we have to start thinking about the belief system that we used to decide whether or not something is truthful. So we have differences or distinctions in terms of that belief system. So there is believing and knowing, and then there is also knowledge and truth. And that's what I'd like to have a look at. So that's kind of the main focus. Got to have my tea, right? My throat coat, because I don't want to get too raspy. Now, all the terms that I've used throughout this particular course: interpretation, evaluation, predictions, reports, inferences, judgments, facts, all these concepts allow us a vocabulary, allow us a way to label that which we are doing as we are looking at this information and trying to make sense of it. So I guess the first thing we should do is just maybe give the word belief a definition. Defining words is never something that you should shy away from in a paper. If you're writing either a case report, or in my case, I'm working on a book, one of the criticisms against it, a reader report, is what an author will read through as they formulate their final draft. And quite often those reports are filled with questions about, what does this mean? What does that mean? What definition is this person using? So let's do the same thing here with beliefs. So the question is, what are beliefs? So beliefs are interpretations, evaluations, conclusions, or predictions about what we believe to be true. We may not have experienced it firsthand, but we believe it to be true because it either sounds reasonable, or we can compare it to something that we have tested before and sounds reasonable again. So as we're doing this, we are putting our faith in the actuality of these facts, the truthfulness of these facts. Science is like magic, but more so, right? That's, I think, something I read on a t-shirt. And it's true. Science can be almost magical in the things that it discovers, but it discovers them in a very consistent, rigorous kind of way. So if science says the following, now the pandemic may not be the best example because it is something brand new. And of course, conspiracy theorists went crazy look at science. See, last month they said something else. Well, yeah, dummy, that's how it works. Science never comes out and says, this is the gospel truth forever. No, it says, to the best of our abilities, to the best of our knowledge, this is what we believe to be true. What we believe to be true. It's not the gospel truth. It is a hypothesis that is now turned into a theory that's turned into a fact, but it's always open for interpretation or change. The problem is that interpretation should not include, well, because I don't like to believe in it, it's not true. It's not good enough, right? So a belief is an interpretation or an evaluation or a conclusion of something that we believe to be true. So that's kind of our working definition. Now, the way in which we form beliefs, right, through interpretations, let's take a look at that in a bit more detail. So an interpretation suggests that other explanations are possible. We're leaving the door open, right, to the possibility of our so-called fact being contradicted, being enhanced, being revised, being changed, or being replaced by something brand new. Think about the things that used to be sort of the gospel truth, and I mean that facetiously because back in the, say, the 1500s, the belief was that the earth was stationary and the sun rotated around the earth. That was literally the gospel truth. And so this was an interpretation of the movement of celestial bodies. And it made sense, right? The earth is the center of the universe, quite literally, because God made it for us, and we are the center of that universe. Well, things have kind of changed, right? Just a little. Well, that was an interpretation of the movement of celestial bodies in the 1500s. And all of a sudden, very quietly, the church, after much scientific evidence to the contrary, and I say quietly because all of a sudden it just was no longer discussed. That's true. The sun is a stationary object and other celestial bodies orbit around it. So that was an interpretation. Now, last week we talked about judgments. Predictions are kind of like judgments because they point to an event that may or may not happen. And again, this is based on interpretation of events as they are unfolding in front of you now. Whether they are factual, whether they are events that actually occur to you. The example was missing the bus, right? And then the final judgment is that the LTC is a horrible system because your bus arrived late today. But you can sort of predict, well, the bus might be late tomorrow. I know there's construction up at the corner a few blocks away, and there's the traffic slows down, or maybe it's got to go around something. So you're making a prediction, but you're doing it because it's based on some reasonable factual evidence, right? There's a detour, or hey, they've ripped up downtown and the buses are going all over the place to get back on the same road. So what we're doing is we're predicting something is going to occur, but we're still basing it on factual information. So here's the way in which it works. If you were to identify a single word, for example, in a statement, to say, oh, okay, well, this is kind of an evaluation. Okay, I believe that watching daytime talk shows is unhealthy because they focus almost exclusively on the seamy side of life. Okay, so you're saying that because the content of these shows is rather sordid and seamy, they're not fun to watch. It's not a good idea to watch these things because you get a really warped view of the world. That's not to say these people don't exist. I would probably guess that some of the so-called guests on Jerry Springer, if he's even still around, some of these people are getting paid to do this because honestly, are there that many warped individuals out these days that really want their 15 minutes of fame? I digress. Okay, watching daytime talk shows is unhealthy because of the content of that show. So there is an evaluation of the content of a show, and then it is kind of a cause and effect. Because the content is so bad, watching the show is bad. So you've made an evaluation, right, or a value judgment on daytime talk shows based on the content. So it's not as if you're just simply willy-nilly saying, oh, I don't like them because I hate them. Well, that doesn't mean it doesn't make any sense. It's called circular reasoning, by the way. You don't ought to be doing that. You can say, because of the following fact. And you can't turn around and say that those shows aren't about seamy, behavior by people, because technically that's all it is. So let's take a look at a conclusion. The statement is, I believe that one of the main reasons 2 out of 3 people in the world go to bed hungry each night is that industrially advanced nations have not done a satisfactory job of sharing their resources. So that's a conclusion. This is based on evidence over perhaps a longer period of time, right? We've had industrially advanced nations for many, many decades, and yet the problem of hunger continues. Perhaps now even worse in certain countries. In the US, homelessness and hunger are abject problems. They are here and now problems, caused partly by the pandemic, but also exacerbated by the pandemic. The problems were there, but certainly one of the main reasons why people go hungry is that the distribution of food, the distribution of surplus wealth, the distribution of, for example, tax dollars, really has not been done very effectively. Therefore, people need to go to food banks. And these days, food banks really are hurting, right? They're really hurting bad because we can't move around as much as we used to because of the pandemic. So all of this would be considered a conclusion based on the evidence that you present. So each time a statement is made, there's always some form of evidence that is presented to back up, right? To give that statement some factual basis. Now, the last one here, I believe that if drastic environmental measures are not undertaken to slow the global warming trend, then the polar ice caps will melt and the earth will be flooded. So the if then, whenever you see that in a statement, stop and read it carefully, because there are two prepositions here, and one sort of supports the other. If this is allowed to continue, then it will reach this. Now, somebody that doesn't believe in global warming say, that's a slippery slope. Okay, that's their opinion. But if we look at the facts, which is the increased temperature of the earth, increased temperature of the oceans, the fact that we have literally footage of ice flows breaking off from the Arctic and the Antarctic. You know, I think one a couple of weeks ago broke off. It was the size of New York City. That's a damn big iceberg. And as that iceberg breaks off and starts to flow, whatever current is there, flow into warmer waters, it's going to melt. Where's that water going to go? Right? It's going to, that much snow cannot evaporate in a short period of time. So again, the statement is not just slippery slope or someone's opinion. It is based on evidence. Drastic environmental measures need to be taken to slow global warming. And what are the facts? Well, polar ice caps are melting. They will continue to melt. Anybody that doesn't believe that, take a look at Greenland. It actually is starting to look like Greenland, because it used to be covered in snow and the atlases that I used to look at as a kid. Now, I'd say about half of it, or maybe a third for sure, is now green. So the nature of this statement is a prediction. If this is happening, if this continues to occur, then the following will happen. And it's not just a slippery slope. It's something that at least has some basis in fact. Now, again, individuals can turn around and say, well, I don't believe that global warming is the thing. Fine. Okay. So if that's the case, some people just will not face facts. And that's a whole other issue. That should be a psychology class, I think. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about beliefs that are formulated, and then beliefs that are then used in statements that are predictions, conclusions, interpretations, and so on. And really, there's also the belief, no pun intended, the belief that you're expressing an endorsement, right? You are believing in those facts. Excuse me. You are also believing in the validity of that factual information to support your statement. So you endorse the accuracy of your belief system by using facts to back it up. So endorsement is also part of a belief, right? A part of a belief system. It is a way in which we can say that I believe these facts to be true. Therefore, I endorse the conclusion that I am about to make, or that someone else has made on my behalf who, oh, look at this. He's not some Looney Tune living in someone's basement. He's a scientist. In fact, there are lots of scientists. I think right now something like 98% of scientists agree that global warming is an issue. And of course, the conspiracy nuts focus on the 2% who are probably paid by, who knows, PragerU or something, to continue saying these things. They're getting paid well because they know they're on the wrong side of history. Okay, now we know that beliefs are not static and inflexible, as I mentioned, because they are based on scientific facts. Those scientific facts are also up for reinterpretation and retesting. And we can reinterpret them. We can throw them out completely. And all of a sudden, oh, the earth isn't stationary. It is what moves around the sun. Can happen, right? So we form and we reform our beliefs throughout our lives because when we're young, we believe certain things because we don't know any better, because our parents told us, or our friends told us, and we want to, we want our friend to continue to like us. So we go, sure, okay, I'll buy into that. So here's how it works, right? We do have these beliefs that grow and develop over time. So what happens is we form beliefs in order to explain what is taking place. Now, in ancient Athens, ancient Greece, and the ancient world, mythology was used to explain things that were occurring. And those individuals believed them. They didn't call them myths. They didn't call them mythology. The ancient Athenians, for example, literally believed that those gods walked among them. And there would be a whole range of things that they would do to keep a ground sacred or a temple sacred. They truly believed these things, and they believed these myths because it was a way for them to understand the world, to make sense of the world. So we form beliefs because they explain what's going on. We test those beliefs, and that's why eventually mythology fell apart and was replaced first by a very primitive form of biological science or physical science, then philosophy, which allowed these physical scientists to think about their not only their formulations, but the results. And then science and philosophy worked together using reason and rationality and testability and so on. And so we tested these beliefs, and we revised beliefs because science continually does this. And then we not only revise them, we retest them. So what happens is over time, certain things that you believe in eventually become kind of ridiculous because you just know better, right? You know that, well, is there a boogeyman that's going to come out after 7 o'clock to snatch kids off the streets? I mean, that used to be a story that was told to us as kids. In fact, it was Bonhomme Setter. It was like the 7 o'clock monster, right? But we had to be off the streets by 7 o'clock. And as kids, hey, it worked, right? But the sad reality is that kids have been abducted off the streets. And at the time we were kids, we didn't think these things happened. I mean, it happened maybe not as much, or maybe it did, and we just didn't realize it, right? You don't know that you don't know. So when we have beliefs, we form them, we test them, revise them, retest them continuously. So as we're doing this, we're asking ourselves the following questions, right? How effectively do these beliefs explain what's taking place? And this is what causes us to eventually dismiss them altogether, or at least revise them. To what extent are these beliefs consistent with other beliefs about the world? If half the world believes that the earth is flat and the other 50% believe it's round, we've got some problems. But it seems like I would like to think, 95% of the world thinks the earth is, some sort of spheroid, maybe not perfectly, circular, but something that resembles a circle. Funny that I don't know the statistics of the number of people around the rest of the world that believe the earth is flat, but for some reason it's a real preoccupation in North America and somehow in the US. I'm not sure why. Lack of education, perhaps? We don't know. But anyway, to what extent are these beliefs consistent with other beliefs about the world? Something like the Flat Earth Society, very much a fringe group, thankfully. How effectively do these beliefs help us to predict what will happen in the future? That's where beliefs can become very, very useful, because if your belief system is grounded in, first of all, reality, and also grounded in truth and grounded in scientific fact, yes, beliefs will be pretty effective on a daily basis to understand the world, because it has been based so far on facts that can be proven to be true. Again, the jury's always out to go back and reformulate these facts, retest them, revise them. But at least for the time being, it becomes a pretty effective way to make sense of the world. To what extent are these beliefs supported by sound reason, compelling evidence? Yes, they could be. Or in the case of the Flat Earth Society that lives, in the murky depths of YouTube, that's kind of where it exists. It literally does not exist anywhere else. And these beliefs are supported not by sound reason, but by one person borrowing from another person who is borrowed from somebody else, and it literally is a hall of mirrors. It's an echo chamber, right? That bubble of insanity is an echo chamber where those individuals literally repeat what each other are saying. And so, are they supported by sound reason? Of course not. Compelling evidence? Oh, they're interesting. For years, I've always thought that, and I don't think this newspaper exists anymore, News of the World. It was worse than the National Enquirer. I don't even know if the National Enquirer is still around. The point is, News of the World was absolutely insane with ideas. And I used to enjoy flipping through it because I just thought, you know what? At the very least, someone out there has got one hell of an imagination. That is a healthy thing. That is, to have an imagination and being creative, that's a good thing. But would I quote from one of those articles in a paper for school? Of course not. Is it entertaining? Hell yeah. But it's not factual. Imaginative? Yes. Creative? Absolutely. Factual? Not at all. It just uses information and just kind of runs with it. So we have to ask ourselves, the information that we get, is it useful? Is it good? So when you are doing this and you are trying to support a belief that you may have, you need to look somewhere, right? You want to look to people of authority, recorded references, right? Peer-reviewed journal articles, or directly observed evidence. That is possible. You can experience something firsthand. And if it's not directly observed evidence, it's personal experience. You may know someone that saw something. So you're kind of one removed from it. But you've got to be able to find that evidence in some factual kind of world, some realm of either people of authority, scientists or otherwise, experts of one sort or another, that have done the work, right? They've done the work for you. So how we interpret and we understand this direct experience by others or testing by others really depends on what we already believe. And this is what I mean by this bubble, this echo chamber of insanity that is conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories, there is maybe a grain of truth, and I can understand that people wish to believe in some of them because the world is a hell of a complicated place, more so day by day. And it is a kind of an easy way out. It's that kind of Northwest Passage out of the insanity that is the world today. Say, well, look, here's the reason why this is happening. 5G networks or the flat earth or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is, if you believe in something, you may consciously or for sure unconsciously start dismissing information rather than looking at it in a realistic, factual, reasonable kind of way. So people tend to choose those perceptions and experiences that fit those previously held beliefs because it's a lot of work to begin to disbelieve. They may just not wish to believe something else because it goes against everything they believe, or worse, everything they've been told to believe. I actually have a video from MSNBC that came out about a month and a half ago, and I'm just thinking about it right now. I'm going to post it because I'd like you to have a look at it. It's a piece by Chris Hayes, and Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Whatever you think of it, I'd like you to, of not Chris, that is, but of MSNBC. I'd like you to have a look at it because he really breaks down how this bubble of insanity that America is living in, how it came about. It's fascinating and also sad and terrifying at the same time. But it really kind of plays into this, some of the ideas that we are discussing here, because some people have previously held beliefs that they refuse to think of anything else. And it makes talking to these people rather difficult. So no one person's direct experience is enough to establish, that set of accurate beliefs. We're no longer Plato. We know that other parts of the world exist that we haven't visited, and we would like to at least find out more about it. So these are at least the ways in which we can get around not experiencing something directly, but at least finding someone that has either done that, right? They've been to war, they built their architecture, and they are an architect, I should say, and they built a building, whatever it may be. Those people have some degree of expertise. So it's true. Few of us have actually based our direct, our information and beliefs on direct personal experience. It just doesn't happen, right? We don't get to experience the world to the degree or to the same degree that of information that is out there. At one point, we've got to go somewhere to get that information and go beyond that personal experience and learn from those people of authority, scientists, engineers, biologists, physicists, people whose job it is to do this every single day and to hopefully do it well. And those recorded references, right? Those peer-reviewed journals. So when we look at it, all right, there are some competing viewpoints for sure. There are some that might deviate slightly. Others will contradict something completely. Now, if they do, it's still worth looking at because there may be some grain of truth. If you remember John Stuart Mill saying, dissent is good in society because at the very least, we get to test that idea, however wacky it may be, and say, look, either the status quo is correct and this person is completely bonkers, or, this person's got something here. I think we need to go back and re-look at this, right? We need to revisit this. Or my favorite, we have to have a conversation, man. Okay, have the conversation, please. But we need to go back and revisit these ideas. So depending on the degree to which these things are contradictory, we need to look at why that is, right? Because when we critically review, right, the beliefs that we have that are coming from others, the beliefs that others have, we have to be able to pursue the same level of accuracy and completeness that we use when examining beliefs based on our personal experience. I have had personal experience of one sort or another. You have as well. Everybody has. And together, we could speak to one another, have that conversation, and sit down and go, here's my life experience. And all of a sudden, things like truth and beliefs are sometimes shared, right? They're situated. In other words, they're part of our belief system that is based on our lives. And where we're missing parts, that's what we need to know where to look, right? To fill in that gap. So more important, and especially these days, because research is not just going on YouTube. I hope it isn't, because we are in a bad position. I don't even know why I'm writing books. So what we need to do is determine the reliability of that information, right? The reliability of the source itself. So it isn't just the facts, it's the source itself. We need to make sure that where we're getting that information, it is reliable. We can believe in it. Now, the example I have right here, Consumer's Report, I believe this magazine is still out. Consumer Report is actually a really clever idea because when you think about it, their writers test various products. And this one, the best mattress for you, could be the best car, the best stereo, the best rake, the best whatever. But Consumer Reports is not funded by advertising, which is really interesting. It's completely through subscription or purchasing in a store. Do stores that sell magazines still exist? I don't know. Hope they do. But the idea of a magazine that is not influenced or biased or sort of pressured by advertisers to make their product look better than someone else's. So Consumer Reports, their whole reason for being is to test products and tell people what the best one is, regardless, not irregardless, regardless of the advertisers. They don't have advertising. They're not being pressured by a company to say, mattress X or rake Y or stereo Z or whatever, it's the best because we're paying you to advertise. No, doesn't work that way with them. So the reliability of those reports are very clear. There is no advertising, but sometimes we have to kind of dig a little deeper to find out whether the source of our material is in fact reliable. When you do that, you should ask yourself various questions, such as, is the source presenting an argument or merely providing information? We're looking at the report, an inference, a judgment. It may have all of those. Now, consumer reports, they're ultimately judgments and evaluations, but they're based on factual evidence. We tested this many mattresses for, firmness, comfort, all the whatever the criteria was, it's described, And they may have, let's say, depending on firmness, mattress X was at the very top. For comfort, maybe it was second or third. And then, of course, an evaluation is made to see which is the top, or which are the top three, I should say. And you look at it and go, yeah, okay, I believe it. I believe that this mattress is probably the best one overall, given the criteria that they have used to decide what makes it the best. So when we're looking at a report, we want to make sure, is it factual? Is it inferential? Is it judgmental? Are there rhetorical devices, the things that we've talked about, the slippery slope, the circular reasoning, the ad hominems, all these things, are they there in the article? If they're not, and it's pretty objective, that's a remarkable piece. And okay, likely what they're saying is worth considering. So how is it purpose reflected in the selection of details, the wording, the tone? All these things go into letting us know that this is a piece of information that likely has some validity. Now, I know it's not easy to read, but right here, this is something. Now, I've been trying to find one that's more recent. This is literally 10 years ago. I'm going to guess it's worse. Okay, in 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 different companies. Now, in 2011, that same 90%, right, of American media, is controlled by 6 companies. I believe now it's 4. Now, notice, I believe. I don't know for sure. I believe it is 4. And now, those 6 companies, and I say that because Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, they kind of gobble each other up. I think CBS was bought out by General Electric a few years ago. I think David Letterman was talking about it. That's how far back it goes. So here are the 6 in 2011, right? So what I'm saying here is those companies control the public discourse, control what gets talked about, and more importantly, what does not get talked about. So if you can imagine those 6 companies, GE, General Electric, News Corp, Disney, any report that is going to badmouth or put any of these companies in a very negative light, well, let's see. Chances of that report making it, to the light of day, highly unlikely. It would have to be supported either as a blog or as a report that is sort of, travels out from under this 6, now likely 4. That's where social media becomes very useful in a perfect world. But social media is also where you are literally mainlining bullshit, and you want to make sure you're not. And so we've got to sort of travel that road and be able to make sure that we know where we're at and the information that we're getting is good. So when we're looking at the information, Fox News is pretty easy to tell. It's right-wing, people that are old, white, and scared most of the time. So their audience is pretty easy to identify given the content of their material. Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes news reports appear to be objective, and that would be nice. But they're still owned by corporations, and corporations call the shots. And if corporations have a controlling interest or vested interest in killing certain stories, they will. They will. There's nothing to stop them. So we have to be really careful at the material that we're looking at. And so we should think about the intended audience. Is it informed? Is it new to the subject? Now, informed, a scientist clearly would be informed rather than new to the subject. Hey, I just discovered this and I'm going to write a report on me finding out for the first time, that, the earth is round. Oh, good. I'm glad you found that out. So when we are looking at these things, we need to look at the source's purpose, their audience, their interests, and also, too, if there is a particular slant in the material. Does it look balanced? Just because the other side is presented, how does the other side fare at the end? Is it a fair and balanced assessment? Many of you last term when we talked about ethics, I commented on your fair and balanced assessment of the 2 positions that you were discussing in terms of capital punishment, state-sponsored torture, euthanasia, the big topics. And many of you did exactly that. Your assessment was fair and balanced, but you took from the other side those particular ideas that you wanted to use by way of support. You addressed them, you acknowledged them, and then you're able to find a particular criticism. And that is what fair and balanced reporting is all about. It is possible. So when seeking information from indirect sources, we want to locate people of authority that can offer that special understanding. Scientists, experts of one sort or another, experts in economics, experts in whatever the field is that you're looking in. In fire safety and fire prevention, I'm sure there are experts that you turn to that are knowledgeable, have experience and wisdom, and what they say matters. What they say is important. So in your field, you know where to turn. But when it comes to just getting information, a lot of people just don't know. They're not really sure what's going on. So it is important that we look to people of authority who actually have that expertise and that wisdom. Sports and entertainment figures, on the other hand, really good for selling products. You're probably wondering, why do I have a picture of Elvis Presley, if you even know who he is, on a bottle of wine? Well, here's the story. Elvis Presley hates wine. But apparently his manager, Tom Parker, said, you know, if Elvis loved wine, he'd love this one. And that's as far as it went. So that's the degree of expertise and wisdom that is used in advertising. So sports and entertainment figures are not people that you should turn to for this kind of information to support a belief system, because their testimony is rarely convincing. We see through it. Unless, let's say, a basketball player is going to tell me that this basketball is really good. Okay, slightly more likely that I'm going to believe him. But Elvis and his wine, knowing that Elvis hated wine, absolutely no way. So really, sports and entertainment figures have a lot to do with the field that they're in and whether or not they're going to support something. Someone who spends all day long in a recording studio is going to tell me that this microphone is really good. I'm going to believe him. And so if that's the case, we need to be really careful, again, who it is that we're getting our information from. So we shouldn't always accept expert opinion without questioning who it is, right? And why they should be even telling me this. So, whoops, just clicked on my thing here. All right. So all of these things are important in terms of the reliability of those indirect sources, because they will play into our particular belief systems, our viewpoints, and so on, because we need to even have it within the purview of our attention. If we are really hardcore believers in the flat Earth, anything that says to the contrary, you're going to ignore. But at one point, let's say you have to deal with this. Where would you go? Where would you start? Well, let's say you're someone that still, I don't know how, but believes that the Earth is stationary and the sun rotates around the Earth. Let's say that you still believe that. Where would you go to find out information that supports it as opposed to discounts it? Clearly, about 110% of the information you're going to find is going to say, sorry, you're wrong. Well, how would you deal with it? How would you then turn around and say, this material ultimately is correct? I need to change my opinion. So the reliability of that secondary source is important, because our personal viewpoints and beliefs will either be supported or contradicted by the content of that report. So we need to be able to know how to deal with it. Because remember, there can be a slight deviation or there can be a complete contradiction. We need to be able to deal with these things and go, okay, I never thought of it this way before. How believable is it? So when evaluating the reliability of sources, it's useful to consider how accurate and reliable their information has been in the past. And so if we look to Consumer Reports, for example, which has had or still has a history, I believe is still going. I believe it started in the 1960s. Now notice again, I keep saying I believe, right? I don't want to say for sure. I know that it's been around through most of my life. So I've been on this planet since 1960. And so as a kid, I remember seeing them. So let's be safe and say the 60s. So it's been around for 50 years. It's been pretty consistent. Now, other journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, it's been around for over 100 years. So there are places we can go to that the reliability of the sources is such that historically, there's never been a time when the peer-reviewed article that appeared in that journal was contradicted or basically besmirched in some way, that this person just somehow just passed it off and no one caught on to it. It's peer-reviewed. They would have caught on to it very quickly. So ultimately, what are we talking about? We're talking about the source being reputable. Is it true? Is this information factual? Can I get a second opinion? One thing I tell students, if you ever see something on Facebook that sounds questionable, outrageous, or whatever, you can find out very quickly whether or not this statement is true. You can cut and paste the headline and in Google and just do a Google search. And if the Google search takes you right back to Facebook, yeah, you're back in that hall of mirrors I just talked about, that bubble of insanity. But if, let's say, a report, one I saw about a week ago, and I did just this, something about a man in Texas is not going to be charged with murder for killing or beating to death a molester that he found molesting his own child. So I thought, wow, okay, that's pushing some buttons. So I looked it up, and it appeared in Global, Texas News, The Guardian. I must have been half a dozen different independent news sources that confirmed this story. Okay, given that this is globally around the world believed to be a true fact, a true event, I thought, okay, it happened. So that's kind of what I do. As soon as I see something that is questionable, I look it up, and it really only takes 10 seconds, literally 10 seconds to look it up. But most people, as a few friends that have now unfriended, would just simply go click share, and don't do that, because you need to look it up, because at the very least it makes you look like a fool. Because if eventually it is contradicted, you've been had, you've been punked, right? You've been punked by some piece of propaganda to push your buttons, and that's not what you want to do. You want to think, not have your emotional buttons pushed through some kind of rhetorical device or information that is clearly wrong and incorrect. So how do you do this? Think about the main idea. What's being presented here? Secondly, and more importantly, what evidence is being provided? Is information accurate, up to date? Does anything seem false? Does anything seem a little strange? Does anything, and this is a little bit more difficult to do, has anything been left out, right? Because we don't know that we don't know, right? This is something that will, this statement, I hope it haunts you, because it should, right? Sometimes it's that bad. We don't know that we don't know. We're not aware of something. So to find out if something's been left out, that requires that second opinion. It requires going further and doing a Google search of something. And you find out, oh, hold on. Oh, this is a very selective reading. This is cherry picking a story to make one point of view, one political point of view, better than the other. So be careful of those. So ultimately, what we've been talking about here is believing and knowing, right? Developing beliefs that are so accurate or as accurate as possible is important, because the more accurate our beliefs are, the better we're able to understand the world around us. We're no longer searching for reality. We kind of know what it looks like, and it becomes predictable. Because, yes, things change all the time. And we have been, let's face it, over the last year, in a rather uncharted territory. And you've heard that statement before. But it's uncharted because things are no longer predictable, right? Waves of coronavirus or COVID-19, and then they ebb and they rise and they ebb. And people's behavior somehow just defies logic. And so it is unpredictable. And this is what makes it so difficult. Because typically when we have a belief system that the world goes according to this plan, yeah, we can calm down a little bit. We can walk out the front door, which is literally right there. We can walk out the front door and believe that things are going to continue the way they are. So a pandemic is where those beliefs get tested big time. So do we now have a clear understanding of knowing and believing? Because if we look at it this way, then we do. When we use the word knowing to distinguish beliefs supported by strong evidence from beliefs which are less supported, or from beliefs disproved by reason or evidence to the contrary. So the following expresses another way of understanding the difference between believing and knowing. You can believe what is not so, that the earth is flat, or that the earth is stationary and the sun goes around it. But you cannot know what is not so. I know it sounds like a conundrum, a paradox, an enigma, a mystery, but you can believe what is not so, and a lot of people do, but you cannot know what is not so. So if something literally does not exist, it's kind of hard to know about it, isn't it? Right? You can misunderstand something, but you can't know something that clearly does not exist. That's really what that statement is saying. Okay, so we're always critical thinkers, and we must analyze and evaluate all the available information. We need to be able to use that to develop our own reasonable beliefs. They need to be reasonable. You need to be able to tell someone else your belief system and not worry about being laughed at. But what's happened, is over time, social media and the insanity over the last 4 years or so is this hall of mirrors, right? This bubble of people that are literally talking to each other in an echo chamber and just repeating back and forth what the one person is saying. And there's no factual information, mostly because they don't need it. They don't want it. I believe this, and that's all there is to it. So we need to be able to recognize when we lack sufficient information to arrive at a well-reasoned belief. I don't know enough to formulate an opinion one way or the other. Now, that's not to say that stopped other people. That's the problem today. People with absolutely no information are busy telling everybody else their opinions about something. And you say, well, what is it based on? Well, because I know so, right? It's okay, whatever. So it doesn't make for a very good conversation, does it? And then finally, media is very important because that's where an awful lot of people get information about the rest of the world. It is. And we know that media will shape unconsciously or consciously our belief system, and that we want to make sure that we understand that the information that is there can possibly, very likely, be biased in some way or another, because really, ultimately, it's impossible not to do that. We are human beings, and corporations that own media will slant and bias information in one way or another, always to make themselves look good or the other person look bad. So, media can shape our beliefs by information that they provide, and more importantly, by the interpretations they give that information. So we need to be weary of recognizing that. We need to see that, okay, this sounds like it's, and especially with issues that are political or economic, this is where those interpretations really matter, because the same thing can occur, and you look at, let's say you go from cbc.ca to torontosun.com, and the same news story is looked at completely differently. Sometimes it's that easy, but not always. So we need to be really careful. Now, again, this is probably difficult to see, but this is a weird graph, which is super informational, because what it is, if you can look up the side, factual reporting sources, right, on the way up, and is the satisfactory quality, whatever. Okay, so complex analysis, analysis source, analysis opinion, opinion source. As you can see, we go down that arrow, it becomes more and more opinionated. And across the bottom, we have the liberal and the conservative media. So as you can see, here, for example, we've got NPR radio, BBC, Christian Science Monitor, Reuters, Associated Press, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. And as you travel down this thing, you can see it, the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, the Daily Beast, MSNBC. Okay, so MSNBC, hyper-partisan liberal, questionable journalistic values. They're getting better. I'd like to say so. They're getting better. And I mean, on the side of the liberals versus the conservative, but they're down around here, right? MSNBC, because I'm saying that because I'd like you to watch the Chris Hayes article, and you'll see that they have gotten better at that awareness of the situation that we find ourselves in. But it is analysis and opinion sources. There are people that, just like on CNN, will come on and give their opinion about something. So their opinion is based on their expertise, right? Their background. So we see CNN here mostly, sort of kind of just on the cusp of opinion sources, and they are. That's a criticism, a very valid and real criticism against CNN. It's just a bunch of people just talking, incessantly about what's going on. But we keep going on. We've got basically the Palmer Report, sort of, just no. So all opinion and liberal utter garbage conspiracy theories. So conspiracy theories are just on the right. They're also there on the left, right there. So as we move up sort of towards the center, we have mainstream, minimal partisanship. In the center, Financial Post, The Economist, Al Jazeera right there. They're all in here. And these are mainstream media in this bubble here that is shows slightly liberal or slightly conservative, but some of these are literally right down the middle, very close to the middle. I'm very partial to Al Jazeera because I happen to like the way they report their news, not because of my political affiliations, but because I seem to kind of get a clear perspective. during the 4 years that Trump was in office, we needed some voice of reason. And I didn't think CNN could do it. I definitely knew that Fox couldn't do it. But Al Jazeera somehow at least gave me the facts and allowed me to formulate my own opinion. They didn't have experts telling me how to think, which is literally what CNN does. So we move down the other side here. The Examiner, the Washington Times, the Federalist, the Drudge Report, Fox News, and Fox News is still up here. Newsmax, InfoWars, which I don't even think InfoWars is even around, but One American News, I think, is out there. But Newsmax has been around for a while. This is this is 2017. So this is about 4 years ago. But as it says, actual news found here. So, I mean, they're being facetious, but that's how bad it is. That's how bad we are. And so at the end, we need to admit that the media will and does shape our belief system in very subtle but also very profound ways. We need to be careful of the way in which media, I will be harsh and say manipulates, but certainly shapes our belief system. And it is not possible to be completely objective. I mean, even Al Jazeera has people, we're human beings. But the difference between a report on Al Jazeera versus CNN or versus Fox is there isn't the blathering of opinionated individuals who somehow pawn off their expertise as newsworthy. It used to be that at the beginning of every hour, certainly at 6 o'clock, you would have the news, right? This was something that people did back when people watched cable television and they had families that they would sit together with, and you might watch the news, and it tended to be factual. But eventually, what ruined it was two things: opinion pieces and the proverbial analysis, but opinion pieces, and the fact that corporate media now is a thing. Those two entities have made it very, very difficult to get factual, objective news. It's still possible, and if you go back to this picture, if you look in these sources here, National Public Radio, BBC, Washington Post, Christian Science Monitor, Al Jazeera, CBS News, Associated Press, it's still possible. They do exist. So if you stay in this realm, you're more likely to get actual factual information. There you go. So that's our class for this week. Thank you for letting me vent. But these issues are serious because the more social media becomes polluted with subjective opinions and inferences and judgments that are not based on anything resembling facts, or if there are facts, they are cherry-picked to manipulate the information to make it look a certain way, and they are willfully ignoring the other side. That's not being fair. That's being unethical. So corporate media clearly is a serious problem. But as we saw, there are ways around it. So keep those things in mind when you're looking for information. And if you come across information, look to see where it's coming from. That's pretty well it. So have a good week. It's Monday morning. It's about 10:45. I've got a Zoom to do in an hour or so. We'll see each other back on Thursday. Take care.